like and subscribe. Now, what is the most bullshit reason for a teacher to give you a bad grade? Because he didn't read my paper. It was a university class where Atar was responsible for grading the papers. He was clearly overwhelmed and just reading introductions and grading based on them alone. I had a 2-part introduction that fully addressed the prompt, but as he only read the first part, one got my paper back with a big C at the top. I ended up getting full credit after I challenged the initial grade. Glad you had a better result. My first large college paper for a pre-Civil War history class freshman year came back with a giant red D written on it with practically no feedback. I was in a writing program and I had always excelled at essays, so I was sort of shocked. Went to the professor and asked him about the grade and lack of instruction. He sighed, looked down and said, "Westhoff, I don't like you." He went on and on after that with some bullshit reasons, but apparently the big issue came from the first week of class. He was talking about manifest destiny and said something like, "Now you have to remember, back in those days there were 50 to 100 miles between towns out in the western USA, and I raised my hand and said that there was still 50 to 100 miles between towns in the western US. He said I was exaggerating, and I told him I wasn't, because that's where I grew up. That paper was 40% of our grade. He refused to change the grade or even reread it. I scraped a C+ in that class, and I was so effing proud of that grade, even though it was the worst grade I received in my life. At the end of the semester, I decided to ask him for his grading documentation to see if I could challenge the paper with the school, but he claimed he had already thrown it away. I found out later that was bullshit too, but I didn't press any further. You should have pressed, at the very least, so he doesn't try that bullshit with someone else. We had weekly spelling tests in my 11th grade English class, which I thought was a bit remedial by that point, and probably said so in a not completely diplomatic way. The teacher even made you write any words you got wrong 5 times and hand that into her. By the end of the class, I would typically get perfect scores on them. But one time I got a test back with no actual errors, marked as a 0%. My teacher's explanation was she saw me talking to someone in our free period before class who ended up doing poorly, and that was my fault, because I distracted them from possibly studying. What? How does this make literally any sense? Teachers are not always as impartial as people in that position should be. Bad days and personal grudges are often a culprit for an unfair grade or detention. Wrote in Chicago format and lost points. The assignment instructions said to write in Chicago format. This reminds me of an assignment in which lost marks for not double spacing my work. I did double space my work back before I learned that double spacing meant to space between lines. I thought it meant between words. No one ever told little old me, and that just made sense to me. A space goes between 2 words, so a double spaced paper must have 2 between them. I did a presentation in biology. The teacher told me she wanted me to do a creative introduction instead of just opening it with the standard "today I'll be presenting." So I did. I invented a short story about an old lady going to the supermarket and worked in some early symptoms of Alzheimer's, the topic I was presenting. I was so invested in that character. She had a name and a backstory. I even drew up a few comic panels so that everyone could follow along easily. Then at the end of my presentation I asked my class which symptoms the old lady in the story had, and hence what stage her Alzheimer's was. I get my grade back, and the teacher deducted points for the intro, since she told me to do a creative intro, so it wasn't an original idea. Like, what the hell? I came up with the story. I drew the comic panels. All of that was me. I felt so betrayed. If I hadn't done a creative intro she would have deducted points, so I did one. And she deducted points anyway, and after all that work, still grinds my gears. I was 15 at the time. I was taking a 1-week online class. In the syllabus, the teacher said you must post 6 times throughout the week. So I posted 6x on Monday, 1x on Wednesday, and felt I was good to go. I get my grade teacher comments and the teacher wrote KNO 905. You had some good posts early in the week but then you stopped posting, so in order to mark you down. I was annoyed by this, but then realized it was the last online course in the program and frankly I didn't care. I still graduated, and that certificate is proudly sitting in my junk drawer for all to see. Taking online courses now, and the rule in almost every single class seems to be one post and comment on 2 of your classmates' posts. Every week it's the same posts. Topic is really interesting and important. I really learned a lot, especially about. Then a few responses saying I really agree. Really is important in today's industry. Thei's. It's so frustrating because they are trying to force discussion, which is the first mistake because it's not organic and the questions really aren't the best for discussions. It's like discussion topic is 1 + 1 = 2. Now I've got to figure out how to stretch the answer yes into a whole paragraph of why 1 + 1 = 2. Then I've got to get 2 paragraph replies to classmates, which can't just say I agree. A friend of mine got a -1 for scratching his head. Our teacher said he was faking it. I guess that teacher had too many bad experiences with women who faked head scratches. Fake head scratches are a real problem in our society, and they are probably what causes hurricanes. My 7th grade gym teacher gave me a D because I hardly ever smiled. My life sucked at that time. You seem like an unhappy kid. Let me give you something else to be unhappy about because of it. Staples were not in the right spot for my essay, even though I had them in the top left corner like always. That's when you know the teacher doesn't like you and is literally looking for petty reasons to take points off. I didn't like a movie that was supposed to be her favorite. She would do stuff like this all the time to other students as well. Complaints were made, but I graduated before I saw where it lead. It insists upon itself. She gave me a 0 because she didn't think I read the book. She said I would have gotten a 75% if she thought I read it. 75% of the test questions right supposedly means I didn't actually do the reading point. Still one of those things that pisses me off even 10 years later. Why wouldn't you give her a verbal synopsis of the book when she said you didn't read it? Because they didn't read it. Clearly, as a high school freshman I think I was too intimidated to challenge her. I regret not making a bigger deal about it at the time. It really hurt my confidence with some teachers in the following year. Literally the first day of school she went around the classroom and asked how many books each of us read over the summer. I said 6. She asked seriously, but really, how many? 6. Why is that so hard to believe? I don't know exactly why. She just didn't like me. I never really had an issue with any other teacher, and I was a pretty good student. I have my suspicions of why she didn't like me. A class most students breezed through with an A, and reading Spark Notes was a class she micromanaged me like a hawk in. Still baffles me to this day, but it is what it is. In the 90s my family didn't have a computer, and I had no access to one. I spent a lot of time on a handwritten assignment for school and the teacher gave me a B. Writing as a comment, I would have given you an A if you had typed it up on a computer. I'm still bitter. I knew a girl in the early 2000s who used a typewriter because she didn't have a printer or a floppy disk reader in her computer. My mom got petty cash in college as a proofreader and typed out classmates' papers on a typewriter. Too poor. B. My teacher lost my coursework on the bus home. I refused to redo a year's worth of work in 3 weeks, and I got taken from an A to a C. Bullsh. School sided with him. What kind of school allows a teacher to, I assume, admit they lost coursework and have the school go oh well, student's fault, minus points? That makes no sense to me. This happened at my secondary school as well. The teacher won't admit to losing the work, and then it becomes UVSM on if you actually submitted it, or they lost it. I've never seen a student win this argument. My friend failed French because she had a French accent, and the teacher couldn't understand her French because she was American. My friend had spoke French since she was 4. Took Spanish class in high school. Half the class was either born in Mexico or first generation American with Mexican parents. But apparently Mexican Spanish isn't real Spanish and would make them down for having accents. Our Spanish teacher was fired after he failed the whole class, including his born and raised for the first 10 years of her life in Mexico daughter. Got points off because of the bad grammar in the quote I used. The quote was a penhemas I'm become death, destroyer of worlds. I'm more shocked that they didn't recognize the quote. I mean, it's definitely not normal modern English grammar, but it survives in Shakespeare and the King James translation of the Bible. Source: regardless, it's a quote, so it doesn't matter. Technically, you could have written I'm become sick, death, destroyer of worlds to indicate that it's an error in the original. But, come on. If you have to toss out Latin shorthand in high school just to get a correctly marked answer, I'd say that counts as some BS. I got 10/10ths on a test, but my teacher took points away from me because she didn't want my classmates to be jealous of my grade. This was English class in a Dutch school, so English is a requirement. I was the only native English speaker in my class and this was a course for adults only. 4th grade, the day before Thanksgiving break. There was no work to be done of course, so we had a busy work art assignment. We were all handed graph paper and told to color each of the squares either yellow, orange, red, or brown. And once we finished, we were supposed to cut out corn shapes to make Indian corn decorations. I already thought this WAA stupid, and filling in all the squares was tedious, so I traced the corn shape on the graph paper and only filled in the squares that would end up as part of the final product. This meant my decorations looked the same as all the others, but I didn't waste time filling in squares that would just get cut away. When the teacher saw what I had done, she gave me a 50 for skipping work. We had a similar busy work assignment in a German course I was in, when a substitute teacher was there who couldn't speak German. We got to watch a German game show that was basically all trivia, and a sheet that just asked the same questions as the game show, which obviously showed the correct answer afterwards. So a lot of us smart people thought, F it, I'll watch at 2x speed or jump around the video to the points where it's asked and answered, and ignore all the filler. Sub was very unhappy that we were doing the work efficiently, just because the point of it was to get exposure to the language. I get that, lady, but we are still doing the assignment, and the instructions were for us to work on other running assignments for that course afterwards anyways. Either way, I'm thinking German the same amount of time. She was upset because she didn't want high schoolers with time to kill. A spelling test, not graded by the teacher, but by the kid next to us. Kid named Anthony decided all my words that had letters U and E were switched and marked pretty much every word wrong. They weren't. Like, this was probably in 3rd grade, so my handwriting was chicken scratch. But that was really stupid. To me, I was upset, since it was the first time I failed something in school. I remember doing tasks in school all the time that required us to switch papers and mark each other. It was a way of saving time for the teacher, of course, but also a way to find out which kids were vindictive little assholes that wanted others to fail. Go to your window right now and scream at the peak of your ability. F you and I. Asterisk FECKO and I. When I was 16, in the middle of doing my GCSEs, my dad got into a serious car accident. He was in intensive care for about 2 months. During that time, we were told that he would probably not survive. Thankfully, he pulled through, but in the meantime, I hadn't been doing any coursework or going to school. This happened in January. My exams were in May/June. I managed to do enough revision to pass my exams, but I never managed to finish my coursework for art class. The quality of my work was worth an A, but I hadn't done enough of it. I applied for mitigating circumstances, meaning that if granted, my work could have been marked on quality rather than quantity, but for whatever reason, the school refused. So I ended up getting a bad grade. That was 10 years ago, and I'm still angry about it. The school refused. Why? I can't imagine that a parent's car accident and subsequent stay in the ICU isn't a bad enough mitigating circumstance. They never gave a reason. Just no. Probably because my dad didn't actually die, so they assumed his accident wasn't serious enough, and that I should have been able to work while he was recovering. But that's just speculation. I'll never know for sure. They tried to pull this on a classmate of mine whose dad suddenly died. Thankfully literally everyone raised hell about it, and they didn't end up doing that. I broke my right arm in 3rd grade. I write with my right hand. The teacher gave me a bad grade because my handwriting with my left hand was barely legible. In 3rd or 4th grade, some girl in my class broke her right arm and the teacher did the same to her. And after the poor girl got upset about it, the teacher compromised by assigning some other girl to do her writing for her. They both had to sit at the very back of the room together, so the one girl could quietly dictate to the other all of her writing needs. Everything from multiple choice stuff to full-on creative writing assignments. And the girl who had to do the writing still also had to do her own work, and was given no extra time as far as I know. That is terrible. I would feel bad for the other girl if that happened to me. Right around the same age I knew someone who broke their right arm during the school year and had to do all their assignments left-handed. I saw how difficult it was for them and thought, wow, I better start practicing writing with my left just in case. This is the only reason I'm pseudo-ambidextrous now. I never broke anything, knock on wood, but as an adult I did manage to get tendonitis in my right wrist working on a project with a deadline, and that's the only time my practice came in handy. No pun intended. That's crazy, but it helped you in the long run, and that's the best part. I would hate to be in that situation again. My 4th grade teacher didn't allow me to be left-handed, and it really affected my grades and everything. It also stuck with me. I used to be exclusively left-handed in most things, but after that school year I was mostly just left-handed in writing, and not much else. And sometimes I kind of wish that hadn't happened. Like it took away a small part of my identity. I've got dysgraphia, which is basically a medical reason for absolutely shitty handwriting. I got a special allowance to use a device. I forget what it was called. That was basically a digital typewriter. It amounted to a keyboard with a simple B/W LCD screen. You could hook it to a computer or printer to easily print stuff off it. It didn't have internet or even a calculator. It only functioned to type. One teacher wouldn't let me use it, despite her legally not being able to do that. Little 6th grade me didn't know she was literally breaking the law, and went with it. We had a test, and I got marked down for poor penmanship. My mom asked me why I didn't use my typing device, and I told her the teacher wouldn't allow it. She raised hell. She effing destroyed that teacher, and for the rest of the year, despite my teacher's objections, I was allowed to use my device anytime I wanted. She raised hell. She effing destroyed that teacher. But punishing a kid for a disability is all kinds of bullsh, and super clearly illegal even before the ADA. Civil Rights Act 1964 made it illegal to discriminate. Idea, which strengthened protections and services specifically for students, was 1975. ADA wasn't passed until 1990. The alphasmet. They stopped making them, but you can buy them used on eBay for $20-30 bucks. Ye gods, my inbox. I have a processing disability that mixes with cerebral palsy to make something a little like dysgraphia. I can write pretty well for someone with CP, I'm told. It just takes me twice as long as a normal person to do it. Half the reason I got bad grades on tests in 3rd grade was because I quite simply didn't have enough time to complete the test, and my teacher thought I was faking it for attention. I failed a lit exam in college because I answered a question too well. We were supposed to write an essay comparing and contrasting one of the books that we read that semester to a modern concept or ideal. We had known about this particular question for weeks, so we had had plenty of time to prepare. Apparently it's possible to be correct because the response I got was that, though it is clear I did not plagiarize, none of my thoughts were original and matched too closely with the author's interpretation of the work. I was the only person in the class to not only fail, but to get less than a B. I got no other bad marks on the rest of the exam either. He failed me based on just that one part. In high school, I used the word lascivious to describe a character in a book, and my teacher didn't know what the word meant, so logically, he took off a point. Oh my god, you just reminded me of the time my high school teacher didn't believe unison was a word. That's ridiculous. She should know a unison is one buffalo standing by itself. If there are two buffaloes then it's bison. You just reminded me of a teacher that thought evinced was just a misspelling and took off points. Still salty about that. Atar corrected the burden of proof to the burden of providing proof. What did they think it was a misspelling of? I've had so many interneters reply to me that some word I used is made up or not a word, when you could have just entered it into a dictionary to see that it's definitely a word. How arrogant do you have to be to assume that a word doesn't exist because you never heard of it, and not at the very least take 10 seconds to check it in a free online dictionary. One guy on Reddit once accused me of using a thesaurus to make my posts sound smarter. I wasn't using any big or rare words. Me, Miss 30th. You didn't give me a point for this, but it is on the mark scheme. Miss 30th, I don't agree with the mark scheme, so I didn't give you the mark. For context, this is a standardized test, which is why there is a mark scheme. I got a F the first semester in chemistry, and I was really pushing myself to get a better grade for the next semester. Needed a good grade to study what I wanted. Then we heard that another teacher from another school would make the test, but the teachers in our classes would grade it. So I have been doing all in my power. Read everything, written summaries, did the math, watched documentaries, etc. And I get the final grade, D. And I was very happy with that. Then my teacher takes me aside and tells me that I actually got a way better grade, C. Could pass as a B. But if he gave me a C, it would look bad for him, since I got a F on his test the semester before. So I was pretty pissed after that, but he left before I could say anything. It was my last day of school as well. Didn't happen to me, but a teacher kinda gave everyone in a class bad grades because they ditched her. They all planned to hang out after the last class. Guess she was bitter about it. She was like, I got one last lesson for you a-holes. Did the teacher want to hang out with kindergarteners or college students? Not a bad grade, but I remember I was so close to being the first person to ever score a 100% on my 10th grade Spanish final. The one question I got wrong was, ¿Qué tipo de comida es el pescado? What type of food is fish? A. El can, meat. B. La fruta, fruit. C. El pan, bread. D. La verdura, vegetable. I of course picked meat and got it wrong because my teacher insisted that fish isn't meat. She's a Catholic and eats fish on Fridays during Lent. According to her, the correct answer is fruit, because fish are sometimes known as the fruit of the sea. What the actual F? Cram your 99%. Sonora. I've had bad Spanish teachers, but what? Assuming you didn't go to a Catholic school or something, this would have been the hill I was willing to die on. Reality is, it's a poor question if it's open to so much interpretation. My girlfriend of 5+ years is Catholic, and she has yet to explain to me why fish isn't meat to my satisfaction. According to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, meat is considered something that comes only from animals that live on land, like chicken, cows, sheep or pigs. Fish are considered a different category of animal. This would be an A paper from some other students, but you can do better. I got a C. And no other feedback on how to improve. Your mistake was being too awesome on your previous papers. Apparently so. I didn't think I'd phoned it in on that one, but maybe it seemed like it. Still, that comment really should have come with at least one area for improvement. I had the same thing happen to me. I was one of the smarter kids in class, and apparently that meant I had to work harder / better / be smarter to get the same grades. I never went below 60% with that teacher, but it's hard on a 10y/OS self-esteem to see Doofy McDoofus with a better grade. That teacher failed you big time. I have some students who occasionally do less than they are capable of doing, but their best is significant. I typically leave a C- after class as their grade. Tell them they did good work, and they got the grade that reflects good work, then remind them to be willing to push themselves to be the best they can be. I had a BY religion professor back in junior high school. She lowered the grade of another student because they had written in the exam that when Moses got the 10 commandments there was lightning, when the correct answer was thunderbolts. Serious, non-native speaker here. I know the difference between thunder and lightning, but what exactly is a thunderbolt? It is another way to say lightning bolt. Not really a correct way, but a way. The correct answer is thunderbolts and lightning. Very frightening me. I already posted here, but I have another story. Had a high school French teacher who failed me on a written test for using pencil. He claimed his eyes only saw pen. My family was outraged and called the dean. The dean was like, oh well, he's getting them ready for standardized tests. My entire family had master's degrees and were like, what standardized test is in pen? It's always pencil. This is a school. Years later I have my doctorate, and not one goddamn test ever was pen only, standardized or otherwise. My paper didn't make her feel happy. It was an analytical writing course designed to teach how to write a thesis. The teacher was one of these super hippie artsy people and most of the curriculum involved just reading articles she failed to get published. So we had to do this analytical discourse on someone's work, and it was trash. So I picked it apart. I got a F. I went to her saying WTF. I followed the rubric to the T. Her response so well, the paper was good and all, but it didn't make me happy. It was kind of mean. And I don't like mean. I was like, the assignment was to find flaws in the paper. It had countless. She replied yes, but it didn't make me happy. You get a ref. I went to the chair, and it turns out her father was on the board of directors, and she had sued the school several times. So she was bulletproof and got to do whatever the hell she wanted. This displeases me. Because all tasks had room for interpretation, multiple answers and opinion. But my teacher only accepted his own exact opinion, interpretation and choice.